Morning. Today we're here to talk about the Hazard Communication Standard, also known as HAZCOM. At the completion of this training, employees will be able to recognize and identify chemical, radiological, biological hazards on a work site by looking at containers, labels, and other clues. What are some other clues? Might be smells. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stains. Could be stains. Very good. Very good. The purpose of HAZCOM is to protect workers from chemical hazards in the workplace. There are two types of hazards presented by chemicals: physical and health. The HAZCOM standard instructs companies how to communicate chemical hazards to their employees, provide employees resources to safely work around and work with hazardous chemicals. Symptoms of exposure are broken down into two categories: acute, which acute happens rapidly, and chronic, and that takes longer to develop over time. The routes of entry are inhalation, which is the most common; absorption, which is something soaking in; ingestion; and injection. So one of these four ways is how we have exposure. Labels. Labels include warning and container labels. Chemical storage containers must be labeled so that the chemical can be identified. The container labels must have the name of the material, manufacturer, miscellaneous safety information, hazard warning, and a list of hazardous ingredients. On December 1st, 2013, there's some major changes coming to the hazardous communication standard. We're going to be discussing some of those things today. Part of that is label requirements. Employee labeling. Anytime chemicals are transported into a secondary container, the new container must be named with the name of the chemical, the date, and the initial of the employee. Why is this important?
Well, you see it a lot when people take chemicals, take them out of their original container, which has the appropriate markings on them, and then they put them into an unmarked container. They might know what they are, but the next person comes along behind them, pours maybe a caustic material or acid or something on them, and they burn just because of the lack of the label. And it can be very easily avoided.
You're very correct. In the old days, when ammonia was used more so in the household cleaning, that was a big risk of mixing the ammonia and the bleach, because it, poured in a spray bottle, unlabeled, not realizing what's what, and then it gets mixed and creates a deadly gas. Okay, first we have the NFPA labeling system. You know what the NFPA is?
That is the National Fire Protection.
Very good, very good. What they've done is created a label system to quickly identify the risk. The NFPA 704 standard system for identification of hazardous materials is for emergency response. It's mandated by U.S. First tentatively adopted guide was 1960. It's also known as the fire diamond, is what it's commonly known as. It's got a diamond in shape. It's got three colors. The white does not count. And you got numbers of 0 to 4. A better example of how that plays out: 0 is minimum hazard, where 1 is a slight hazard, 2 represents a moderate hazard, 3 serious hazard, and 4 is a severe hazard. So the blue represents health hazards, such as poisonous or it's toxic, where the red is how flammable is it, what's the flash point. Yellow, the reactivity hazard, corrosives versus base. And then white is a specific hazard. So to go over the white section, we have oxy, which is oxidizer, acid equals acid, alkali, corrosive, COR, corrosive. And a W through line with it means don't use water with it. And then, of course, our radiation hazard was pointed out. Now, there's other labels out there, and DOT uses a specific set of placards to identify hazards in cargo trucks that they use. With that, got the emergency response guide. Now, this isn't a guide that tells people how to clean things up, and it shouldn't be mistaken for that. What this is used for is first responders' initial action, and at the company, that's all we're to do. We're not trained to clean it up. We don't participate in the cleanup, mainly evacuating and protecting the public. Each hazmat shipment must have an MSDS or an SDS. We'll get further into the SDS. SDS is the global change of the MSDS, and it's a safety data sheet instead of material data sheet. The ERG, which is the Emergency Response Guidebook, is printed every 4 years. And the most recent copy is not required by the regulation. Okay? Something to be cautious on when comparing the 2012 version of the book to the 2008 is what I found is some of the distances of quarantine are greater now than they were in 08. So they've identified some of the hazards a little clearer in the newer version. What it looks like, current version. How many of you have ever used this book?
Yeah.
Have you? Why did you have to use it?
At that point, we went to the fire department. They would respond to different emergencies. They just didn't know what the vehicle had, what they were carrying. Not very often. We did a lot of training.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good. So who uses the book?
First responders of any sort.
For us, truck drivers. But yeah, mainly first responders. The quick and proper response to a hazardous materials incident can limit or prevent harm to persons, property, or the environment or yourself. Every minute saved can influence the outcome. For the hazard classification, DOT has 9 different hazard classes. A good thing to use to identify that is the DOT chart 14 that I provided you. It's a quick reference. This is that chart, and it goes through each type of placard. It gives a little bit of information for them. A placard should be square on point. But it's a nifty tool. I found it very useful in my career to quickly identify the thing. The hazard class must be displayed in the lower corner. So here we have the 2, the division, determined by the color. Now we'll cover the different sections of the book. The book is separated into 4 sections. First section we're talking about is the yellow section. It's towards the front of the book. It actually starts on page 20. And so if we have the proper code, UN number or name, we can look into this section and go through it. Now it says here, if there's no fire, and the item you're looking at in green, go directly to the green section. And we'll talk about the green section a little more in depth here in a second. The yellow sections list dangerous goods in numerical order of the ID number. The section quickly identifies the guide to be consulted from and the ID number. So when we go to the yellow section, what you'll see is the ID number is the first item in the column. Then you've got the guide number. That tells us which section to go to in the orange part to identify what precautions should be made in the event of a spill. Now, of course, you got to remember if there's no fire, go directly to the green. The green pages. Green pages, when a situation does not involve the fire, go directly to the green section. Table of initial isolation and protection action distances. Look up the ID number and the name of the material that identify the initial isolation and protection action distances for the material. The green section starts on page 285 of your book. And again, this is where we go when there's no fire involved.
Would this be something that you use in the event of a chemical leak that is not on fire to find out the evacuation book?
Correct. Correct. All right. Go ahead and do an exercise. Got UN number 1079. So first thing is, what is it?
Sulfur dioxide.
Sulfur dioxide. Very good, very good. So the next question we have, what do you do in case of a small spill? Okay. And we're assuming it was not on fire because that was not part of the question.
Okay, it says that you're going to first isolate in all directions 300 foot.
Okay. So is there a difference if it happens at night or if it happens at day?
Yes, it is. Then protect downwind persons. At night, you would be 1.7 miles.
Very good, very good.
4/10 of a mile during the day.
So what if we had a large spill?
Okay. Large spill will be an isolation of 3,000 feet, and then at night it says 7 miles.
Correct. Very good.
3.5 daytime.
So is there a difference if the accident occurs at day or night?
Absolutely.
Yes, downwind protection distance at night is greater than during the day. When dealing with an unknown hazardous material, the key word is up. You want to go upwind, uphill, and upstream is where you want to stay. Because if there's a leak, it's going to go down. So, failure to do so may result in you not being upright and breathing. Next section we cover is the orange section. The orange section is the most important of the guidebook because it is where the safety recommendations are provided. The orange section is made up of 3 main sections. The first section describes potential hazards. Second, public safety measures based on the situation at hand. And the third is emergency response, including first aid. So, actions to be taken, potential hazards, public safety precautions, PPE, emergency response actions. At an accident, you see the ID number 2762 on the placard. What do you do?
Well, I first looked up in the yellow section to identify what it is.
Very good.
2762. And it says there,
Page 59.
organochlorine pesticide, a liquid, it's flammable, and it's poisonous.
Okay.
So, guide number 131. It's not on fire, it's just a picture of it.
Right.
We're looking at what to do on that. So, I go into the green section, if it's not on fire. Let's see what kind of isolation it's recommended. And it's not in there.
We go to guide. It says guide page 131 in the yellow section, so we go to page 200.
Page 200?
Yeah, it'd be in the orange section.
In the orange section, all right. lists the potential hazards as health. It's fatal if inhaled, toxic, ingested or absorbed through skin. We want to take very close precautions on contact of any sort, whether it be in the air or on the skin. Fire will produce irritating, corrosive, or toxic gases. Vapors may cause dizziness or suffocation. Runoff from fire control or dilution may cause pollution, so we want to be very careful about putting water on it.
Yeah.
To let it
Right.
run off into the spring.
That's good, that's good. And that's just a quick run through what we do in the situation where the initial responders, of course, we've got the team out here getting it under control, what you see in the pictures. And I'm sure they're taking all the precautions necessary. The blue pages is the next section in the book. Materials are listed alphabetically by name. It also provides a guide number and ID number. The section starts on page 90 of your book, and it lists dangerous goods by name, of course, in alphabetical order. So if you know the name of the substance but don't know the UN ID number, then this would be the fastest reference for you to go. And of course, it's going to list you a corresponding guidebook number to go on the orange section and identify the hazard. The material safety data sheets, okay, provided by the manufacturer, contains chemical specific details, must be located in a conspicuous place. Most of the time, is what do we do to make our books here noticeable at a shop or facility? Comment.
Well, it'll be located on the wall, generally in a shop, and it'll say MSDS. Clearly, we read it with, fairly good distance.
Absolutely.
Sometimes has bright colored chevrons or different things on it.
Right.
Noticeable.
Right.
And trucks, they'll be in the door of the truck most of the time.
Very good. Very good. Now, the MSDS contains 24/7 contact information, and then it gives various chemical information. Now, part of the changes that are coming in place is they're changing the MSDS, which is the Material Safety Data Sheet, to the SDS, which is the Safety Data Sheet, is the new name for it. And companies are required to train all their employees on this new format by December of this year. Now, some of the key changes is the SDS is composed of 16 sections, where the MSDS has the material, but it's not in any specific order. It depends on who's the one creating the MSDS ones that has all the required information. So with the new system, it's going to be a lot easier to find the information you're looking for because it'll have its own section. The SDS, I gave a handout on the differences on the SDS and the MSDS to kind of help transition to the new form. First section we have is identification. Identification provides the product identifier, manufacturer or distributor name, address, phone number, emergency phone number, and recommended use or restrictions of use. The hazard identification includes all hazards regarding. The second one is hazard identification. It includes all hazards regarding the chemical required label element. Third one, composition. Information on ingredients includes information on chemical ingredients, versus the trade secret claim. First aid measures includes the effects and symptoms of chemical reactions, or whether it's acute or chronic. Firefighting measures lists suitable extinguishing techniques, equipment, chemical hazards from the fire. Accident release measures gives you procedures for protecting the equipment and proper methods of containing and cleanup. Section 7 is handling and storage, and it lists the precautions for safe handling and storage, including the incompatibilities. Number 8 is exposure controls and personal protection. Of course, that's going to go over the threshold limit value and personal protection equipment that we can use. I recommend holding on to the example sheet. It has been real helpful for me to make the adjustment of understanding the new sections in the new order. What benefits do you think will come from the ILMS DS versus the SDS?
I was noticing the term in here that they used in the front end of it, which was globally harmonized system. So I think the goal here is to try to make this a uniform system so that it's the same everywhere you go.
Right.
And that will create less confusion, I think, no matter where you're at.
So far, how many different labels have we gone over just in this small training? So we've got the National Fire Diamond, okay, and then we've got DOT placards, and then now we have different labeling requirements coming up, so it can allow for a lot of confusion. So you're right, what they've done is try to make it more universal to where we can recognize the hazards no matter where we're at. If we have products come from overseas, they may not have our same labeling requirements, and that may allow for somebody to potentially get exposed to the chemical, and that is where they're going with these changes. The other items on the list: physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information. Now, when we get into sections 12 through 15, those are not mandatory, so they may or not be on a specific chemical. And then section 16 is other information, including the date of preparation for the last revision. So if the chemical gets updated, they're going to put the revision date on the SDS sheet you're looking at, so you know you're looking at the most current one. Training requirements. HAZCOM, Hazardous Communication Training Requirement, upon initial hire, annually thereafter, and any time a new chemical is introduced. So anytime we start working with a new chemical, we need to include that chemical so that our guys are properly trained on it so that we can limit the exposure. Other thing that comes into mind is what type of PPE should be worn when handling it. Okay, and then specific to the workplace. Written policy. The company has a written policy on hazardous chemicals in the workplace. It requires each facility to list all hazardous materials or chemicals. Training requirements. Responsibility for establishing and maintaining the program. Emergency action plan for spills and exposures. Coming to HAZWOPER, which is Hazardous Waste Operation and Emergency Response. The Federal Rule 29 CFR 1910-120, the standard contains safety requirements employers and their subcontractors or public sector responders must meet in order to conduct cleanups or emergency response operations. What portion of the emergency response operations do we participate in?
I would think the very initial.
The initial first response. Absolutely. We
try to eliminate as much problem as we can, but we're not big in having to actually clean it.
Correct. And this training will not provide that level of training.
If we can prevent something from becoming worse, we should probably do that, but only if it's not in place of other things.
That is correct. That is correct. So again, this training only covers the first responder initial phase, which is to isolate, clear the area, not let anybody come in, contact the proper people to come in and handle the situation. The different levels of training: first responder awareness, which is what we're going through now. First responder operations awareness, hazardous materials technician, hazardous materials specialist, and incident commander. And again, this training is only providing the information for the first responder awareness. Number one, identify the hazard, evacuate the area, notify the emergency response, conduct cleanup, and proper disposal. Petroleum products, what we're most common to come in contact with, we've got crude, diesel, oil, and fuel, acid as a disposal way, any hazardous substance, the chemicals they use at our work site, and then a placarded vehicle spill. First responder duties, recognize the hazardous release is the first step. Second would be to evacuate the area, notify the appropriate personnel, and keep others from entering until emergency personnel arrive. Do not enter the area for any reason. Again, it's not our responsibility to clean it up, just to evacuate the area and notify and allow the professionals to come in that are trained to do that. Any questions?
No, I see where this is very relevant to a company that transports moves things that can be dangerous, is just know what to do in the event of emergency.
Absolutely.
Good.
Another thing I'd like to kind of show you and go over is the new pictorial hazards. Should have the handout. And it goes over the new labeling requirements, and it shows you, for flame, we've got a fire. All the edges must be in red. It's a diamond on point. And as you can see, they're very easy to understand the hazard associated with these labels. A typical label that you might see on the container, represented here, contains product identification, precautionary statements. It's got a signal word on it, which that's something new. It goes danger is the signal word here. And then it's got the hazard statement, lets you know what the immediate hazards could be or are. Tells you what to do in case of a fire. And then also goes over the first aid requirements. Let's go ahead and take a quiz. Give you a couple minutes to work through your test, and then we'll review it together. I have the right to know about the chemicals I come in contact with in the workplace. True or false? True. Very good. Very good. Number two, a good way to find out information about a chemical is to read the label.
True.
That's true. Very good. Any employee who wants to know more about a chemical has the right to read the MSDS or SDS. That is true. The National Fire Protection Association diamond is divided into 4 sections. That's true as well. Each section of the National Fire Prevention Association diamond gives information about a chemical's characteristics. Very good. Okay, for this one, we're going to match the color with each section that represents the hazard that it represents. We've got the blue as a health, red is fire, yellow is reactivity, and then white is a special hazard, and it specifically identifies what that is on the white section of it. Some chemicals cause damage to your body right away, others take a long time to affect you.
Sure.
And what's that called?
Acute and chronic.
Very good, very good. Some of the special hazards you might find listed in the white section of the National Fire Protection Agency. Diamond R.
Should be all the above.
Very good, all of the above. Doing great. When dealing with toxic chemicals, good ways to reduce the hazard are. You got all of the above for that as well. The SDS safety data sheet has 16 sections. That is true. Question 11 asks, what is the UNID for xylene? So, to figure that out, there's a couple of different ways we can identify that. One of the ways you could have done it was to go to the yellow section. But a better way to do it is in the blue section, everything's listed in alphabetical order.